So today we look at diluted earnings per share. Maybe I can just use EPS, diluted EPS. Now, the diluted earnings per share is essentially the earnings that are made on every share, the earnings that are made on every share of a public company that is calculated assuming that all the securities that are convertible were duly exercised. Assuming that all the securities that were convertible are duly exercised. Now, the securities may be converted maybe from preference shares to ordinary shares. Remember, the preference shareholders are like the creditors to a company. That's why you find that the preference dividend must be paid first before the ordinary shareholders. The ordinary shareholders are like the owners of the enterprise or the owners of the company. So if we look at the difference between now the earnings per share and the diluted earnings per share, we can look at their differences in two ways. One is that when we are looking at the capital structure of the companies that have the basic earnings per share and the diluted earnings per share, you find that the companies, the basic earnings per share are used by companies that have just a simple capital structure. Just a simple capital structure. But the diluted earnings per share is used for companies that have complex capital structures. The other difference is that the basic earnings per share is always higher than the diluted earnings per share. It is always higher than the diluted earnings per share, since in the diluted earnings per share, all the convertible securities are added to the common shares in the denominator. So common shares is like the ordinary shares. So that is the reason why you find that when we are calculating the basic earnings per share, the quotient that we will get there will be higher, because now for the diluted earnings per share, we again add all the convertible securities to the ordinary shares in the denominator. I hope you still remember how we were getting the earnings per share. The earnings per share, maybe to recap that, to get the earnings per share, we were taking the earnings after deducting the preference dividends. So the earnings after deducting the preference dividends, and then we were dividing it by 1/0. And 1/0 is simply the weighted average number of ordinary shares. So this is how we were getting the basic earnings per share. Now, the formula that is used to calculate a company's diluted earnings per share is simply the company's net income minus the preferred dividends, which is just the earnings. Then now in the denominator, we will add the weighted average number of shares outstanding, weighted number of ordinary shares outstanding, plus now the impact of convertible preferred shares and maybe the impact of other dilutive securities. So the other securities may be the options, the warrants, but in our case, we'll just settle on now the impact of the convertible preference shares, the impact of the convertible preference shares. So a convertible preference share is a share that you can change. Converting simply means that now you change them from now the preference shares to now the ordinary shares. So that is the dilutive ordinary shares. Now we can look at an example. One, I think you have already downloaded the notes, but if you have not downloaded, I think I can post it in our public chat. If we look at an example, let me post it first. So example one, okay, I've posted it there. We are told that the issued and fully paid share capital of a company on 31st December 00 comprised: one, we have the ordinary 800,000 ordinary class A shares of 25 shillings each. Then we are told that on 1st January 01, the company issued 200, that is not 20x 200,000 ordinary shares of 30 shillings each, which do not rank for dividend until 31st December. The post-tax net profit for the year ended to 31st December 01 was 2480. So we have 2480, the earnings now. So we are told that we calculate the basic earnings per share, and we also calculate the diluted earnings per share. So to solve this, so maybe I can divide my board. Yes. To solve this, one, we have been given the earnings. Let me just use an E. The earnings for the period as 2,480,000 as the earnings. Then we are told that the number of shares that were issued first, the number of Class A shares that were issued first were 800,000. Then we are told that on 1st January, the company issued 200,000 which do not rank for dividend. So maybe we can note this as B, additional shares 200,000. So we are told to calculate the basic earnings per share and the diluted earnings per share. So this is straightforward. Now, for us to get the basic earnings per share, we'll take the earnings, which in our case here is 24.80. Remember, the additional shares were not ranking for dividend. So 24.80. And then we divide by the 800,000 ordinary shares. So what will that give us? Cosmos, what is the quotient? Cosmos, what is the quotient now? If we divide 24,80,000 by 800,000, what will that give us? Silas, uh, 3.1. So the basic earnings per share in this case will be 3.1 shillings. So please remember to indicate that 3.1 shillings. So that is the basic earnings per share. Then now if we move to now the diluted earnings per share, in the diluted earnings per share, we'll now add, please make sure you make the correction in your notes. We are told that on 1st January 01, the company issued 200,000 shares. I know in your notes it is written 20x0. It is not 20x0,000, but 200,000 shares. So for the diluted, we will still use the same concept or the same formula by taking the earnings, and then in the denominator now, we will add now the additional shares that were not ranking for dividend. These are now the shares that have been converted now. These are the shares that have now been converted to ordinary shares, the preference shares that have been converted. So our diluted earnings per share, our diluted earnings per share will now be given by 24.80, 1,000 divided by now the sum of 800,000 plus the 200,000, which is now 1 million. So please, you cannot somewhere where we've got this 1 million. What we have simply done is that we have added the 800,000, the ordinary shares that were there before. Then we have added the additional convertible securities to the 800,000. And that is what is giving us 1 million shillings. So what will this be? What is the quotient? Margaret Kiesa, what is the quotient?
2.48.
2.48, that is correct. So 2.48 shillings, not just 2.48 itself. So 2.48. So that is correct. Any question? Any question up to that point? Okay. So if there is no question, I think we can move on. We are still in diluted earnings per share, but I want us to look at the concept of convertible securities. Convertible securities. Convertible securities. And in our case, we will just look at the preference shares that may be converted to ordinary shares. Now, the terms of issue of the convertible securities will specify the date and also the number of equity shares to be issued. The conversion rate may also vary, and it may be assumed for the purpose of calculating the diluted earnings per share that the conversion takes place at the most advantageous conversion rate from the holder of the potential ordinary shares. Now, for the purpose of calculating the diluted earnings per share, the net profit or loss that is attributable to ordinary shareholders as calculated in the basic earnings should be adjusted after the tax effect of maybe the interest that is recognized in the period of for the dilutive potential ordinary shares. And also we may also have to look at any other changes in the income or the expense that may result from the conversion of diluted potential ordinary shares. Then the dividends on diluted potential ordinary shares may also affect the calculation of the earnings. So you have also to be keen on how to arrive at the net profit attributable to ordinary shareholders. And as I said, conversion simply means that we change the status of the shares. And particularly, we are looking at the preference shares. Remember, the preference shareholders are like the creditors to a company. So when we are changing the status, it means that now the preference shareholders will no longer be like the creditors, but we are changing them to maybe the owners of now the company. So that at the end of every financial year, we don't have to pay them the preference dividend. Remember, the preference dividend is a must. Whether the company makes a profit or a loss, they must be considered first before any other shareholder. But now the advantage of changing the preference shares to ordinary shares is that now it will no longer be a requirement to settle the payments of preference shareholders first. Because now for the ordinary shareholders, they are given dividends only if the company makes a profit. In case there is no profit, then there will be nothing that will be left to share with the ordinary shareholders. So that is the advantage of converting the preference shares to the ordinary shares. And I hope we are clear on that. Remember, we are looking at the diluted earnings per share. When we change now the status of preference shareholders to now to the ordinary shares. Any question up to that point? Any question? Okay. If there is no question, then I think we can look at example 2, which again I want to post because I know most of you are using their phones. So let me post it in our public chat. Okay. So in example 2, we are told that the issued and fully paid share capital of a company on 31st December 01 was 400,000, 7% preference shares of 1 shilling per share, 4 million ordinary shares of 1 shillings per share. Then the post-tax net profit for the year ended 31st December 01 was 372,000. Then we are told that on 1st October 1999, the company had issued 1.2 million, 6% convertible loan stock. Then between 2002 and 2005, convertible per 100 shillings of loan stock into ordinary shares of 1 shillings per share as follows. So on 30th September 2002, 120. On 30th September 2003, 115. On 30th September 2004, 110. 30th September 2005, 108. Then we are told that the tax rate for 2001 was 35%. 35%. Then required, we are told to compute the basic earnings per share. And number 2, we compute the diluted earnings per share. So that is what we have there. That is what we have there in our problem. So first of all, I want us to start with the basic earnings per share, which we can get directly. Remember, to calculate the basic earnings per share, we will take the earnings, that is the earnings less the preference dividend, divide by now the WANOs, the weighted average number of ordinary shares. So we first of all get the earnings first. We calculate the earnings. So solution. So the earnings now, to get the earnings, first of all, we'll take the post-tax profit. We get the post-tax net profit. Which we have been given as 372,000. Post-tax net profit 372,000. Then we less the preference dividend. So we less preference dividend. So maybe I can just write preference div. So we have to calculate this. If you look at our problem, we were told that the company issued 400,000, 7% preference shares of 1 shillings per share. So it means that the cost of these shares is 400,000 times 1, which is 400,000. So we multiply the number of shares by the price of each share. So that is 400,000 times now the rate there, which is 7%. So if you multiply this 7% of 400,000, what will that give us? Boniface Nyaga. Boniface Nyaga, what will that give us? That will give us 28,000. So we are subtracting 28,000 from 372,000. So subtract this from 372,000. If we subtract that, what will we have? Prudence Mithika. Yes. Members, don't just log in and disappear. Subtract 28,000 from 372. Yes, Cosmas Kipleting, that is 344,000. 344,000 as our earnings. So now the basic earnings per share, will now be the ASEAN. It is not 372. We have, okay, 372 is the earnings, yes. Then you less the preference dividend, which we have calculated as 28,000, and therefore the difference there is 344, not 372. I hope that is clear. So the basic earnings per share will be given by, we take the earnings, and the earnings we have calculated it as 344,000. 344,000, and then we divide this by wanos, and our wanos here for ordinary shares is 4 million. 4 million shares. So can we get the quotient if we divide 344 by 4 million? So what will be our earnings per share? Okay, Cosmas Kipleting 0.086 0.086 shillings, 0.086 shillings, which you can write in cents as 8.6 cents. Not 86, but 8.6 cents. Yes, I hope now it is clear. So Cosmas, don't write 0.086 Kenya shillings the way you have written. It should be, the shillings should come first. Shillings first, and then now you can have 0.8, 0.086. Yes, not the way you have written there, but that is the quotient there, which is okay. So I hope we are clear on the calculation of the basic earnings per share, unless there is a question. Unless there is a question. Okay, if there is no question, then we can now move to now the diluted part 2 of the question, or part B of the question, the diluted earnings per share. Diluted earnings per share. So remember that now when we are looking at the diluted earnings per share, we will take into consideration the issue of the adjustments due to the tax rates, the issue of adjustment due to the tax rates, okay. Listen to me. Okay, so I hope now I'm clear. Can you hear me? Yes, can you hear me now? I think now it is okay. It had got some challenges. Is it now okay and clear? Uh, Members, is it okay? Okay, okay. Thank you, thank you, thank you. My network had a challenge. Is okay now. Now I'm saying that now to calculate the diluted earnings per share, we must take the consideration of the adjustments of the convertible loan stock that was issued. So we must take into consideration of that. And the adjustment will be due to the tax rate, which is, we are told, is 35%. That is 35 out of 100. So first of all, let us calculate the earnings. The earnings. Mwelo, leta niweke hiyo nitumie. Inasumbua. Hello. Okay, I think we can calculate the earnings. The earnings now in the diluted earnings per share. So in the earnings, first we will take the post-tax, or okay, we use the basic earnings in the diluted earnings per share, and the basic earnings, we have calculated this already by taking the post-tax net profit, post-tax net profit less now the preference dividend. So there is no need of repeating the process. So you just take the basic earnings, which we've got as 344,000, 344,000. Can you start the post-tax net profit, and then you less the preference dividend to get 344. There is no harm in doing that. But me, I wanted us to just go straight away to the basic earnings, because we had calculated the basic earnings before. So to this now, we will adjust it by adding, we add, we add the interest on the 6% convertible loan. We add the interest on the loan. So I'll just write the loan, interest on loan. And this loan, we add the interest on the loan. This loan is a 6% convertible loan stock, which we adjust for after the tax effect. So remember, if you look at our problem, we were told that on 1st October 1999, the company had issued 1.2 million 6% convertible loan stock. And the value of that was just 1 per share. Yeah, we are converting it to the ordinary shares. So the amount of the loan is 1.2 million shillings, not 1.2 million shares. So we are converting that to the ordinary shares. So we add the interest on that loan. But remember, the interest on this loan, we will arrive at it by multiplying 6% by 1.2 million shillings. And we have to adjust it based on the tax rate. And the tax rate there is 35%. The tax rate is 35%. So the 35% is the tax that is paid, meaning that now the amount that will remain is 65%, because the tax rate is paid to the government, not to the company. So what the company will get will now be the other remainder, which is 65%. I hope I'm clear there. So we have to calculate this interest. So we take 1.2 million shillings, 1,200,000 times 6%, So 6 out of 100. And then we adjust this. So after paying tax, what will remain to us is 65%, which is 0.65, or 65 out of 100. So can we get that product? And remember, this 65, we have arrived at it by subtracting the tax rate, which is 35%, which is 35 out of 100, from now the total amount, which is 100 over 100. 100 over 100. 5% is the tax that is paid to the government. So part of this, the proceeds from here, part of this amount is paid to the government. So what will remain to the company is the 65%. That is what the company will have. So Eddie Barawa, what have you got in the product? Multiply 1,200,000 times 6% times 0.65, or 65%. Yes, Wedi? Wedi? Okay, Cosmas Kipleting, that will come to 46,800. 46,800. Silas Ochebo, the same amount, so the amount here is 46,800. Boniface Nyaga, the same. Margaret, the same. So once we've got this, now we will add it to 344,000. So if we add it, what will be the sum? 344,000 plus 46,800. What will be the sum? Okay, the sum there, Margaret, 390, 800, Ochebo, the same. Boniface Nyaga, the same. 390, 800. Prudence, the same. Cosmas, the same. So we've got the earnings in, we want to calculate the diluted earnings per share. So first of all, we get the earnings. Then now the second item that we are supposed to find is the equity shares in the issue. The equity shares, or simply the WANOS equity shares. So this again, we have to calculate it before we get the diluted earnings per share. So in the equity shares, first of all, we have the equity shares for basic earnings per share. For basic earnings per share. And this was 4 million shares. So that is 4 million. Then now we have the convertible loan stock. we have the convertible loan stock. So we will add that, add convertible loan stock. So let me just write a convertible loan. For this, we have to work problem. If you go back to our problem, we are told that on 1st October 1999, the company had issued 1.2 million 6% convertible loan stock, and they were convertible per 100 shillings of loan stock into ordinary shares of 1 shilling per share as follows. In 30th September 2002, 120, 2003, 115, up to 2005. But remember now, the period at which we are calculating this is now we are calculating this at the end of 2001. So we'll use the conversion rate for 2002, for 2002, because we are doing our calculations at the end of 2001. So if that is the case, then now our convertible loan stock, to calculate the number of shares there, will now take 1.2 million. Remember, the cost was just 1, so 1.2 million. Let me just write 1,200,000 in full. 1,200,000 times 120 over 100. Remember, we are told in our, if you look at the problem, we are told that the loan stock is convertible per 100 shillings of loan stock, per 100 shillings of loan stock. That's why you find us now dividing 120 by 100. So this will give us the convertible securities, the loan stock that will convert to the ordinary shares. So can we get this 1.2 times 120 over 100? So that is simply 1.2 million times 1.2. Because 120 divided by 100 is 1.2. So what will that give us? Barawa? 1,200,000 times 120. Yes. Okay, Boniface Nyaga, 1,440,000, the same to Prudence. Okay, Barawa also there. ASEAN. We have Cosmas Kipleting, so that is 1,440,000. So we were adding this. We were adding this to the 4 million ordinary shares. So that will be 5,440,000. 5,440,000. So that will be that is we'll consider as our one-nose in this case. Now, therefore, the diluted earnings per share, will now be given by the quotient between now the earnings that we had got in our previous slide. Maybe I can show that. The 390, 800. So the earnings, 390, 800. Divide by now the one-nose, which in our case is 5,440,000. That will give us the diluted earnings per share. So can you calculate that? Get the quotient. Okay, so again, ASEAN has found 27.1 cents. Cosmas Kipleting, 7.2 cents. Wedi, what are you getting? Silas, 7.2. ASEAN, 7.1 again. So Bonfas Nyaga, 7.2. So I think now this should be 0. Margaret, 7.2. So 7.2 cents. 7.2 cents. I think that is correct. That is correct. So any question up to that point? Any question up to that point on how we can calculate the diluted earnings per share? Diluted earnings per share. Remember, when you are calculating the diluted earnings per share, you also have to adjust the earnings if there is a conversion. And also you'll have to adjust the one-nose. Okay, so I think if there is no question, we can end the live session and we move to the discussion forum. Please ensure that